Swag has found our good friend Adam Rittenberg, ESPN. He is now in Big Ten country talking to us over here in Oregon. Good morning, Adam. How are you doing?
Hey, good morning. Great to be on with you guys. Somewhat, and feel like you guys are here almost as I sit here on Radio Row. But yeah, exciting day 3 of Big Ten Media Days. We've never had a 3-day event, and certainly a lot of news today with the Ducks and Huskies and the defending champs in Michigan.
What is, as this conference has expanded now to 18 teams, and you mentioned the Huskies, the Ducks, the LA schools, what is interesting or what's standing out in the forefront of Adam Rittenberg's mind today about Big Ten Media Day?
Well, again, it's kind of the first truly public chance we get to hear from Sharon Moore, the new head coach at Michigan, replacing Jim Harbaugh. We obviously heard from him and saw him quite a bit last season as he was the interim or acting head coach. But now it's his program, and he's going to get to take the podium and address everybody who's watching and the media that are here in Indianapolis. So excited for that, and certainly for Dan Lanning, to come in from Oregon, not just as a new member in a new region to enter the conference, but this is a program that has incredibly high expectations. I think most Oregon fans rightfully should be disappointed if they don't make the college football playoff this year with the system expanding to 12 and how close Oregon's been and the roster that they've assembled. So, history has shown that when you join a new conference, you typically struggle right away. I don't think that's something that Oregon has in their minds at all, nor should they with the team that they have. So excited to hear from Dan. And then obviously Jedd Fisch, I talked with Jed about this a little bit in the spring. One of the benefits to being such a journeyman and coaching at so many different places throughout his career, he's not even 50 years old, is that he's been in a lot of first years, whether it was Miami with Al Golden or different NFL spots. I don't know if there's ever been a first year in college football history that resembles what he's taking over at Washington, given what they did last year and then what their roster, how much it's changed since January 10th or whenever that game is to when we sit here today. So really excited to hear from Jed, obviously, at his first Big Ten Media Day.
Adam, I read your piece where you interviewed 10 different first-year college football coaches, and one of those you talked to is Jedd Fisch. How did he go about rebuilding that roster where he had less than 50 players that went and performed and played and were on the team in the national championship game?
Well, it's not easy. Certainly, the portal was something they had to be very involved in from the moment that he took the job. There were a few players that came with him from Arizona, but let's face it, they weren't the premier players. T-Mac is still at Arizona. Noah Fafita is still at Arizona. They have a number of NFL caliber guys who did not make that move with their former head coach and some of the assistants that moved from Arizona to Washington. So again, it put a lot of pressure on Jed and his staff to backfill some of those spots because they talk about depth. And Washington, we didn't see some of their backups last year because their starters were so good, and the NFL draft bore that out. But will they? And they may have guys that are ready to step in and contribute and be really good players. But as you guys know, depth is a word that's thrown out a lot for a reason. What's going to happen when there's injuries, and that's where some of those portal guys and fast tracking some of the recruits that had signed or did sign with the new staff when they came in. It's going to be really, really important for Washington. I do think one thing that they benefit from is that their early portion of the schedule is not overly daunting. It does get tougher as you get into October, but it's not like what USC is facing. USC gets LSU right off the bat, and then a few weeks later, their Big Ten openers against the defending champions, Michigan at Michigan Stadium. That's not Washington's opening, so they have a little bit of time to ease into the season before things get tougher later on.
Adam Rittenberg, ESPN, ESPN.com is our guest here, joining us live from Big Ten Media Day. Big Ten Media Days are brought to you in part by Legends Casino. Fun is how we roll. James Franklin talked yesterday, and he basically said, we win 10, 11 games, but that's not the expectation here at Penn State. People sign up for better because they expect better. They haven't done better. And I don't know if anybody would say James Franklin isn't a good coach, but it's interesting the polarization he creates as the coach at Penn State. What is the reasonable expectation of Penn State football in your mind, and can Penn State take a leap? We got Oregon. We'll see what UW does in the future. Michigan just won it. Ohio State is the favorite. We got the LA schools in this now. What is Penn State's future in this conference in your mind with Franklin?
Yeah, I was encouraged by what I heard from James because it needed to be said. He basically said if we don't make the playoff, people are really going to be unhappy. They already are unhappy when they don't, they haven't made that step. And again, they've won 10 or more games 5 times in his tenure. They won the Big Ten on this field I'm sitting on right now back in 2016, just a few years after the one of the biggest scandals in college football history. But since 2019, it's been just okay. Even though again they've won 21 games the last 2 years, they haven't taken that next step. They haven't beaten Michigan or Ohio State since the 2020 season. They haven't beaten Ohio State, I believe, since 2016. Now, the benefit they have is that, because the divisions go away, for example, this year they don't have Michigan on the schedule, but they do have some of the new schools from the West Coast. And, I don't know if there's a program in the country, guys, that should benefit more from more access to the playoff than Penn State, given where they finished in the CFP standings. I mean, they've been 8, 9, 10, 11 a number of times, and yet they've never made it into the 4. So there's really no excuse to not make it into the 12, and I'm fascinated to see how they'll perform, especially on the offensive side. Andy Kotelnicki coming in from Kansas, one of the more creative offensive coordinators in the country, and James Franklin again acknowledged he didn't really do this during the season, even though it was obvious, that they needed to be more explosive. They were one of the worst teams in the country in yards per attempt or percentage of attempts at 20 yards or longer. So Drew Aller, who's this big deal quarterback, top 60 recruit, they need to get more out of him and stress defenses, and that's one of the reasons why James made an offensive coordinator change. I'm really excited to watch them, honestly, guys. Their first game may not get as much attention as a Clemson, Georgia, or some of the others, but Penn State at West Virginia, it's a West Virginia team that won 9 games, that believes they're a top 25 team, that returned a lot of pieces, and that's a good test for Drew Aller on the road in a hostile environment. So we'll know pretty early on whether Penn State is for real.
Adam, when you have Dan Lanning coming up to the podium at 8:30 your time or 11:30 your time, 8:30 our time, what do you expect to hear from Coach Lanning? And then what kind of reception has Oregon gotten from a lot of the traditional Big Ten media over the last couple days at Big Ten Media Days?
Yeah, I expect a lot of energy and positivity and confidence. I mean, Dan Lanning has the right to be confident as he enters the Big Ten, given what they have, what the team that they're returning. I mean, there's obviously a lot of talk about Ohio State's offseason and what they were able to do in the portal and what they were able to do in terms of retaining players. Oregon's in that same conversation, in my mind, with what they were able to do, especially at the quarterback position. And, not a lot of Big Ten teams brought stars. Dan Lanning's bringing Dylan Gabriel, who's one of the favorites, if not the favorite, for the Heisman Trophy. So he has a lot of reason to be excited, but I think, those still questions in this league. Can he win the big game? Same questions you guys are asking there locally. That's the one thing that's eluded Dan. It's arguably had the better team the last few years in the Pac-12, hasn't won a Pac-12 title, doesn't have a college football playoff appearance to show for himself. And you look at their schedule, obviously Ohio State, they get Michigan, Wisconsin. There's plenty of opportunities to record signature wins as they enter this new conference. And so I'm sure he'll be asked about that. And that's really the only skepticism that I hear. A lot of positivity about, hey, they're the readiest. They're the team that's going to compete right away of the 4 because of their recent success, but especially what they did in the offseason.
Adam, we will let you go on this one because we appreciate you stopping by. I know you're super busy today, man. It's going to be a long day, so I understand it. What was the most interesting thing you did in the offseason? What was the thing that helped charge you? You sound really excited. Football season is back for a lot of us. What is something Adam Rittenberg did in the offseason that got him charged up and some good rest?
Yeah, I always love talking actual football as opposed to some of the other things we talk about in the offseason, so that naturally does it. But it was probably spending a little bit of time in your corner of the world. I was up in Seattle, went up to Vancouver and Vancouver Island back in late June and early July, and it's a pretty spectacular place to spend some time. As someone who lives in a very flat place, it was nice to show my kids that there actually are mountains and more beautiful vistas, and maybe they'll be tagging along with some of my Big Ten trips.
Well, people don't give Big Ten country enough credit for how beautiful it is. It's great to have. No, it sounds fantastic, man. Thanks for hopping on with us this morning. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll catch up with you down the road.
You bet. Thanks for having me, as always.
All right, there we go. Good stuff from our good friend Adam Rittenberg of ESPN joining us at the table live at Big Ten Media Day.